When I heard my son whisper those words to his wife during my wedding ceremony, "Look at her with that old man. She's desperate," it felt like a cold blade slipping between my ribs, slow and deliberate. I stood there at the altar, my hands clasped in front of my simple lace dress, the scent of fresh lilies from the bouquet filling the air, but all I could focus on was the faint murmur behind me, carried on the hush of the small church. My new husband, Arthur, squeezed my fingers gently, his calloused palm warm against mine, as if he sensed the shift in the room, but he said nothing, just smiled, that quiet, knowing smile of his, the one that crinkled the corners of his eyes beneath his silver-rimmed glasses. I forced myself to breathe, to focus on the minister's words about love and commitment, but inside, a storm brewed. How could my own flesh and blood mock the man who'd brought light back into my life after so many dark years? The ceremony blurred after that. Vows exchanged, rings slipped on with trembling hands, mine from emotion, Arthur steady as ever. As we turned to face the congregation, I caught my son, David, averting his gaze, his wife Lena, smirking behind her manicured hand. The applause felt hollow, like rain on a tin roof, and as we walked down the aisle, arm in arm, I wondered if this day, meant to be a new beginning, was already tainted. But I pushed it down, deep into that place where mothers store their hurts, and smiled for the photos outside, the autumn sun filtering through the leaves, casting golden spots on the gravel path. That evening, at the reception in the modest community hall, we'd rented nothing fancy, just white tablecloths and string lights. I tried to lose myself in the joy. Arthur danced with me to an old jazz tune, his steps surprisingly graceful for a man in his late 60s. His flannel shirt tucked neatly into khakis. He wasn't flashy, that's what I loved about him. But as the night wore on, I overheard more snippets: Lena's giggle, David's low chuckle calling Arthur the old-timer when they thought I wasn't listening. It stung, but I reminded myself, weddings bring out the worst in some folks. Little did I know, this was just the surface of a deeper rift, one that would force me to see my family in a light I'd long avoided. Before all this, my life had been a quiet rhythm, the kind that settles in after loss, like dust on a windowsill. I'd been widowed for 8 years, ever since my first husband, Tom, passed from a sudden heart attack at 52. We weren't wealthy. Tom worked as a mechanic, and I managed the books for a small bakery in our town of Elmwood, population just under 5,000. But we had stability, a cozy 2-story house with a porch swing where we'd watch fireflies in summer. David was our only child, born when I was 25, and he grew up with scraped knees from bike rides and stories read by lamplight. After Tom died, it was just us two for a while. I threw myself into work, baking pies at dawn, the smell of cinnamon and butter clinging to my clothes like a comforting hug. David went off to college on scholarships and loans, studying business, always talking about making it big. He met Lena during his junior year at Sharp, ambitious girl from the city, with sleek black hair and a laugh that could fill a room. They married young, right after graduation, in a flashy ceremony I helped pay for by dipping into my savings. I was happy for them. Lena brought energy into our family, even if her designer bags and constant talk of promotions felt a world away from my simple life. They moved to the city, about an hour's drive away, and started building their future. A condo, careers in marketing for her, sales for him. Visits were sporadic, but I'd drive up with homemade the steam fogging the Tupperware lids, and we'd share meals around their glass dining table, laughing about old times. Then, 2 years ago, I met Arthur. It was at the local library's book club, nothing romantic at first. He was new in town, retired, he said, from various ventures, living in a modest cabin by the lake. Tall but unassuming, with salt and pepper hair and a gentle baritone voice that reminded me of old radio shows. We'd discuss novels over coffee, his insights always thoughtful, drawing from a life I sensed was richer than he let on. He didn't talk much about his past, no boasts, no photos of grandkids or exotic trips, just quiet stories of fishing at dawn, the mist rising off the water, or fixing up old cars in his garage, the tamps of oil on his hands. Our friendship bloomed slowly, like spring crocuses pushing through snow. A walk in the park, where he'd point out bird calls, the trill of a cardinal, sharp and hopeful. Dinners at my house, where I'd cook pot roast, the savory aroma filling the kitchen, and he'd wash the dishes without being asked. His sleeves rolled up, humming softly. He made me feel seen, not as a widow or a mother, but as Eleanor, a woman with dreams tucked away. When he proposed last spring, on a bench by the lake with the water lapping gently at the shore, it wasn't with a diamond ring but a simple gold band that fit perfectly. "I don't have much to offer in a flash," he said, his eyes steady. But I have a heart that's yours. I said yes, tears blurring the sunset, feeling alive in a way I hadn't since Tom. David and Lena seemed supportive at first. They came for a visit, Lena complimenting Arthur's rustic charm, though her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. David clapped Arthur on the back, calling him Pops, but there was a stiffness in his posture, like he was sizing him up. I chalked it up to protectiveness after all. I was their mother, stepping into a new chapter. We planned a small wedding, just family and close friends, no extravagance. Arthur insisted on paying for it all, quietly writing checks without fanfare. "It's my honor," he'd say, his voice soft, like a whisper in the wind. But as the date approached, subtle shifts emerged. David called less, his voice clipped on the phone, the background hum of city traffic underscoring his haste. Lena sent texts about the venue. "Is it really just the hall? We could upgrade." I brushed it off, focusing on the joy, the way Arthur's hand felt in mine during evening strolls, the earthy scent of fallen leaves crunching underfoot. Yet, deep down, a whisper of doubt stirred, like a draft through a cracked window. Was my happiness threatening theirs in some way I couldn't see? It started small. That first clue, a few weeks before the wedding. I was at the bakery, kneading dough for cinnamon rolls, the flour dusting my apron like fresh snow, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Lena. "Hey mom, just curious, what does Arthur do again? Retired from what?" I replied casually, mentioning his vague ventures, but her follow-up felt probing. "No family money or anything, just wondering for the toast." I laughed it off, but it nagged at me, a subtle itch. Then, during a family dinner at my house, the table set with my best china, the aroma of roasted chicken wafting through the air, David asked Arthur directly, his fork pausing mid-bite. "So, Art, what's the plan after the wedding? You got investments or something to keep you busy?" Arthur smiled, wiping his mouth with a napkin, his movements deliberate. "Oh, I dabble, mostly enjoy the quiet life now." Lena exchanged a glance with David, her eyebrow arching slightly, and the conversation shifted, but the air felt thicker, like humidity before a storm. I told myself it was nothing. Sons worry about their mothers, daughters-in-law are sometimes blunt. That's all it was. I kept baking, kept planning, kept pressing wildflowers between the pages of my journal the way I did when Tom was alive. Arthur noticed the tiny crease that had settled between my brows. One night, as we sat on the porch swing, cicadas humming in the dark, he rested his rough hand over mine. "You're carrying something, Ellie," he said, voice low, the porch light catching the silver in his stubble. I almost told him, almost let the words spill about the whispers, the side eyes, the way Lena had laughed when she thought I couldn't hear. "She really thinks this grandpa is going to take care of her." But I swallowed it. Arthur had never raised his voice, never pushed for details about my worries. I didn't want to hand him my children's disrespect like a burden. So I just leaned my head on his shoulder and said, "Weddings make everybody act foolish." He kissed my hair, smelling faintly of cedar and soap, and let it go. The real crack appeared the week before the wedding. I'd gone to the city to help Lena pick up her dress. She'd insisted on something modern and sleek. Ice blue satin that cost more than my monthly mortgage. While she was in the dressing room, I waited in the plush chairs, sipping complimentary champagne I didn't want. My phone lit up with a message from David. I smiled, expecting maybe a sweet note about looking forward to the big day. Instead it was a screenshot, a grainy photo, taken from behind, of Arthur and me walking hand in hand at the farmer's market. Someone had circled Arthur's face in red and written underneath, "Mom's new boyfriend, 67 years old. Net worth probably $43 and a rusty pickup. Thoughts and prayers." Below that, a string of laughing emojis from David's coworkers in their group chat. My stomach dropped so fast I tasted metal. I pressed a hand to my mouth so the salesgirl wouldn't see me tremble. When Lena swept out in her dress, twirling, asking how stunning she looked, I could barely nod. All I could hear was my son's cruelty echoing in my head. That night, I sat at my kitchen table long after Arthur had gone home. The house was quiet except for the tick of the old wall clock Tom and I bought on our honeymoon. I opened my laptop and, hands shaking, typed Arthur's full name into Google, something I'd never done, because it felt like spying on the man who'd trusted me with his tomorrows. Nothing alarming came up at first, just a few charity mentions. An old newspaper clipping about a scholarship fund in his late wife's name. I was about to close the lid, ashamed of myself, when I clicked one more page. A business journal from 23 years ago. And there he was. Arthur Langford, founder and CEO of Langford Maritime Industries, shaking hands with a senator at a shipyard ribbon. The caption read, After a decade of explosive growth, Langford's company is valued at just under $3 billion. My breath left me in a whoosh. I scrolled frantically. More articles. Quiet sale of the company 15 years ago. Arthur stepping away after his wife's long battle with cancer. Donating the majority of proceeds to medical research and coastal conservation. He'd moved from city to city, never staying long, living simply, giving anonymously. There were no flashy headlines, no society pages. Just a man who had walked away from everything most people chase and chosen silence instead. I sat back. Tears sliding hot down my cheeks. All this time I'd thought I was the one bringing stability to his retirement. And he had quietly paid for the wedding venue, the flowers, the caterer without ever letting me feel like charity. He'd let David and Lena mock him, call him old and broke, and never once corrected them. The next days were agony. I watched David and Lena arrive for the rehearsal dinner with all polished confidence. David in his tailored suit. Lena's heels clicking like gunshots on the church hall floor. They hugged me too tightly, smelled of expensive perfume and entitlement. When Arthur greeted them, David's handshake was limp. Lena's kiss landed somewhere near my ear instead of my cheek. At one point, as we practiced walking down the aisle, I heard Lena murmur to the bridesmaid beside her, "I give it 2 years, tops." Then she'd be nursing him and wondering where her savings went. I pretended I hadn't heard. Arthur caught my eye and gave me the smallest shake of his head. "Let it be," his gaze said, but something inside me hardened, like bread left too long in the oven. The wedding morning dawned soft and golden. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror in the lace dress I'd sewn late nights after work. Pearls at my throat that had belonged to my mother. Arthur waited downstairs in his navy suit, looking handsome and calm, reading the paper with a cup of coffee. When I came down, he folded the newspaper and took my hands. "Whatever happens today," he said quietly, "I'm the luckiest man alive." I almost told him then about the screenshot, the articles, the plan forming in my heart, but the photographer knocked, and the moment slipped away. The ceremony itself was beautiful in its smallness. Sunlight threw stained glass painted colors across the pews. My best friend Marlene read a poem. And then came the moment that will stay burned in my memory forever. The minister asked, "If anyone here has a reason these two should not be joined, speak now." A nervous titter rippled through the guests. And from the second row, David cleared his throat loud, deliberate. I froze. My bouquet trembling in my grip, the petals brushing my fingers like whispers. Arthur's hand tightened on mine, steady as always, but I could feel the pulse in his thumb quicken just a fraction. The church fell silent, the kind of hush that presses in on you, thick and expectant. David's throat clearing hung in the air, and then he stood, slowly, his chair scraping against the wooden floor with a sound that echoed like a judgment. "Mom," he said, his voice carrying that polished tone he used in sales pitches. We just want to make sure you're thinking this through. Arthur seems like a nice guy, but come on, you're 62, he's pushing 70, and retired with no real assets. We've been worried. This feels rushed. Like you're settling?" Lena nodded beside him, her lips pursed in false concern, her blue dress shimmering under the lights. A murmur rippled through the guests. My sister gasped softly. Marlene's eyes widened. I felt heat flood my face, not from embarrassment, but from a rage I'd never known I could hold for my own child. Arthur turned slightly, his expression calm, almost amused, but I saw the flicker in his jaw, the way his shoulders squared. The minister adjusted his glasses, stammering, "Well, if there's no formal objection, ... But David wasn't done. He stepped into the aisle, gesturing vaguely. "Look, Mom, we've done some digging. Arthur's got no online presence, no LinkedIn, nothing. What if he's after your house, your savings? We love you. We don't want you hurt." That was it. The betrayal laid bare, not in whispers, but broadcast to everyone I cared about. My vision blurred, the stained glass colors swirling like a kaleidoscope. I thought of the screenshot, the articles I'd found, the quiet dignity Arthur had maintained through their snide comments, and in that moment, something inside me snapped, clean and final, like a branch under too much snow. I turned to face David, my voice steady, though my heart hammered against my ribs. "Digging, is that what you call it? Spying on the man who loves me, mocking him behind my back. I saw the messages, David, the ones where you called him broke, desperate. You think I don't know?" His face paled, the confidence draining away like water from a cracked vase. Lena reached for his arm, whispering, "David, not here, ... But I wasn't stopping. The words poured out, raw and unfiltered, the air in the church growing heavy with the scent of candle wax and tension. "Arthur isn't who you think. He's Arthur Langford, the man who built an empire from nothing, sold it for billions, and chose to live simply because that's who he is. Not for show, not for greed. He paid for this entire wedding out of kindness, while you two sneered at him like he was beneath you. Gasps echoed around us. My sister's hand flew to her mouth. A cousin whispered furiously to his wife. David's eyes darted to Arthur, who stood there, unmoved, his hands still in mine. Lena's smirk faded, replaced by a flush of red creeping up her neck. Is that true? David stammered, his voice smaller now. The salesman's polish cracking. Arthur finally spoke, his baritone gentle but firm, like a river over stones. It is, but it doesn't matter. What matters is how you've treated your mother on her wedding day, no less. I've known about the whispers. I chose not to engage because family is sacred, but you've crossed a line, son. The minister cleared his throat again, glancing at his watch as if time could mend this. Guests shifted uncomfortably, the rustle of programs like dry leaves. I looked at David, really saw the boy I'd raised. Now a man twisted by ambition, Lena's influence wrapping around him like vines. She'd always pushed for more. The bigger condo, the fancier car. And now, they'd assumed Arthur was a threat to whatever inheritance they imagined. Why? I asked, my voice breaking just a little. Why couldn't you just be happy for me? David opened his mouth, closed it, then muttered. We were protecting you. Thought he was a gold digger? The irony hit me like a slap. Arthur, the billionaire in flannel, accused of chasing my modest savings. I laughed, a short, bitter sound that startled even me. Protecting me, or protecting what you think is yours. Lena stood then, her heels clicking as she pulled David back. This is ridiculous. We're leaving. But as they turned, the damage was done. The truth hung in the air, exposed and ugly. The minister, bless him, pushed forward. Shall we continue? I nodded, squeezing Arthur's hand. We exchanged vows, our words soft but resolute, the ring cool on my finger. But the joy was shadowed, the applause tentative, as we signed the register in the vestry, the quiet room smelling of old books and incense. Arthur pulled me close. I'm sorry, he whispered. No, I said, resting my forehead against his. They're the ones who should be. The reception that followed was a haze, tables laden with finger sandwiches and punch, the string lights twinkling like distant stars. Guests milled about, whispering some congratulatory slit, others shooting glances at David and Lena, who hovered in a corner, faces tight. Marlene hugged me fiercely, her floral perfume enveloping me. You did good, Ellie, standing up like that. But inside, the heartbreak gnawed. My son, my only child, had humiliated me on what should have been a sacred day. As the cake was cut vanilla with raspberry filling, the knife slicing clean, I watched David approach, Lena trailing behind like a shadow. Mom, he said, voice low, eyes on the floor. I didn't mean. We thought you thought wrong, I interrupted, handing him a plate. And you hurt me, deeply. Lena chimed in, her tone defensive. It was just a concern. You never told us about his money. Because it doesn't matter, I snapped, keeping my voice down as guests chatted nearby. Love isn't about bank accounts. But clearly, to you, everything is. David shifted, uncomfortable, the plate trembling in his hand. Can we talk later? Fix this. I looked at Arthur across the room, laughing softly with my nephew, his presence a balm. Maybe, but not today. They left early, the door closing with a soft thud, leaving an emptiness in their wake. The party continued, but the air felt thinner, the music a distant hum. That night, back home, Arthur and I sat on the porch, the swing creaking gently. The moon hung low, casting silver light on the lawn. He poured us tea from a thermos, steam curling in the cool air. What now? He asked, his hand finding mine. I sighed, the weight of the day settling. I confront them properly, make them see. But confrontation wasn't my style, never had been. I was the mother who baked cookies for apologies, who hugged away hurts. This time, though I needed more, the next morning, over coffee that tasted bitter despite the sugar, I planned. No screaming, no ultimatums, just truth, laid out like cards on the table. I called David. The phone ringing 4 times before he answered, his voice wary. Mom, we need to talk. Come over tomorrow. Alone, if you can. He hesitated, then agreed. Lena texted later, I'll be there too. We're a team. Fine, I thought, let them come as a team. They'd face the consequences together. When they arrived the next day, the house smelled of fresh brewed chamomile tea. Calming, I hoped. David looked tired, dark circles under his eyes, Lena's makeup flawless but her posture stiff. We sat in the living room, sunlight slanting through the curtains, dust motes dancing like unspoken words. I started slowly, recounting the whispers, the screenshot, the Google search. David's face crumpled as I spoke, Lena's growing defiant. We were wrong about the money, David admitted, rubbing his temples. But Mom, you sprang this on us. He's old, and old. I echoed, voice steady. Tom was your age when he died. Age means nothing if the heart is right. Lena leaned forward, nails tapping the armrest. It's not just that. What if he gets sick? You'll be caregiving again. The audacity stung. And what if I do? That's marriage through sickness and health. But you too. You've shown me your priorities. David reached out, but I pulled back. We're sorry truly. I nodded, but the apology felt thin, like skim milk. Sorry isn't enough. You need to make amends. To Arthur. To me. They exchanged glances, the kind couples do when deciding how much to yield. What do you want us to do? Lena asked, her voice edged with caution, like she was negotiating a deal. I took a deep breath, the chamomile steam rising between us. First, apologize to Arthur, sincerely, not for show. Then, reflect on why you acted this way. Was it fear? Greed? Whatever it is, own it. David nodded slowly, his fingers twisting his wedding band, a habit from when he was nervous as a boy. Okay, we'll talk to him. But Lena crossed her arms, her bracelet jangling softly. And if we do, what then? Everything is back to normal. No, I said firmly. Trust is earned back, not given. You'll need to show me you're better than this. The conversation stretched on, voices rising and falling like waves on the lake. David admitted their worries stemmed from money. His job had hit a rough patch. Commissions were down, and they'd been counting on my nest egg someday. Lena confessed her own insecurities, growing up poor, always chasing security. It humanized them, made the hurt ache differently, but didn't erase it as they left. David hugged me awkwardly, his cologne sharp and unfamiliar. Lena offered a tight smile. We'll make it right, Mom. I closed the door, the lock clicking into place, and leaned against it, exhaustion settling in my bones. Arthur called later, his voice a comfort through the phone. How did it go? Honest, I replied. Painful, but honest. He came over that evening, bringing wildflowers he'd picked by the road, daisies and Queen Anne's lace, their stems still damp. We cooked dinner together, the sizzle of onions in the pan filling the kitchen. A simple act that grounded me. Over the following weeks, I took action in quieter ways. I updated my will, not out of spite, but clarity, ensuring Arthur was protected, and setting aside funds for David only if he proved himself. I confided in Marlene during our weekly coffee, the cafe's espresso machine hissing in the background. It's like seeing your child for the first time as flawed, I said. She squeezed my hand. We all are, Ellie, but you raised him better. David and Lena did apologize to Arthur. Over a tense lunch at a neutral diner, the vinyl booths sticky, the air thick with fryer grease, Arthur accepted gracefully, shaking David's hand, but his eyes held a new wariness. Family means lifting each other up, he said simply. I watched for changes. David called more, asking about my day instead of rushing through. Lena sent a card handwritten, surprisingly vulnerable, admitting her jealousy of my second chance. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Yet the wedding's shadow lingered. At night, I'd replay the ceremony, the gasps, the exposure. It fueled a resolve to live unapologetically. Arthur and I honeymooned modestly, a cabin in the mountains. Hikes where the pine scent cleared my mind, campfires crackling under stars. He shared more of his past then, the boardrooms, the deals, the loneliness after his wife's death. I walked away because wealth without heart is empty, he said, poking the embers. I understood. My own life had been rich in love, poor in dollars, but full. Back home, the public consequence unfolded gradually, like a flower blooming in slow motion. Elmwood was small. Word spread through church groups, the bakery counter, the grocery aisles. My sister told a friend, who told another. Soon whispers reached David's city circles. His coworkers, the ones who'd laughed at the screenshot, now knew the truth. One even messaged him, half joking, "Dude, your stepdad's loaded. Hook me up." David called me about it, voice strained. People at work are talking. It's embarrassing. Good, I said, not unkindly. Let it teach you humility. Lena faced it too at her office, where status was currency. A colleague mentioned it casually over lunch, the clink of forks pausing. Your mother-in-law married a billionaire. Why the secrecy? She admitted later it stung, forcing her to confront her assumptions. Their social media ones filled with curated perfection went quiet for a while. No more boastful posts about weekends away or new gadgets. Instead, David shared a photo of us all at a family picnic we'd forced ourselves to have, caption, "Learning and growing together." The community response was mixed but mostly supportive. At church, the minister pulled me aside after service, the organ music fading in the background. "You handled that with grace, Eleanor. A lesson for us all." Even my customers at the bakery commented, as I boxed up donuts, the powdered sugar dusting the air. "Heard about your wedding drama. Good on you for standing tall." It wasn't vindictive joy I felt, just a quiet justice, the scales tipping back. David and Lena's mockery had boomeranged, exposing their shallowness to those whose opinions they valued most. Friends distanced subtly. Invitations dwindled. David lost a potential client who'd heard the story secondhand. Don't trust a man who disrespects his own mother. They felt it, the social chill, and it prompted real change. David enrolled in a financial counseling course, admitting their debts had fueled their fear. Lena volunteered at a women's shelter, her heels traded for sneakers, helping others chase dreams without stepping on toes. As months passed, the wound scarred over. Arthur and I settled into marriage morning coffee on the porch, his reading glasses perched on his nose as he scanned the paper. Evenings with books by the fire, the logs popping softly. He donated quietly to local causes, involving me in decisions, like funding the library's expansion. Our legacy, he'd say. David visited more, alone at first, then with Lena. Conversations deepened about regrets, forgiveness. One afternoon, as we walked by the lake, leaves crunching underfoot, he said, "I was scared of losing you, Mom, and jealous, maybe." I linked my arm to his. "You won't lose me, but you almost did." Healing came in layers. I forgave, but remembered lessons etched like lines on a palm. Arthur's wealth opened doors. A family trip to the coast, where waves crashed and we built sandcastles, laughter mixing with salt air. Lena softened there, sharing stories of her childhood. Vulnerability surfacing like shells on the tide. Through it all, I rebuilt in small, deliberate ways. Mornings started with Arthur's gentle kiss on my forehead. The sheets warm from our shared sleep, the faint aroma of his aftershave lingering. We'd walk hand in hand to the bakery, where I'd knead dough while he chatted with customers, his easy manner drawing smiles. Life felt fuller, not because of his money, but his presence a steady anchor after years adrift. The healing deepened during quiet moments. One evening, as rain pattered against the windows, Arthur and I pored over old photo albums. There was David as a toddler, grinning toothlessly. Me and Tom, on our wedding day, young and hopeful. Arthur pointed to a picture of me alone after Tom's funeral, my eyes hollow. "You were so strong," he said, his thumb tracing the edge. "I had to be," I replied, leaning into him. "But now, with you, I can be soft sometimes." Forgiveness came gradually, like dawn lightening the sky. David and Lena made efforts. Surprise visits with groceries, helping Arthur fix the porch railing, the hammer's rhythmic taps echoing our mending. Lena even baked cookies one afternoon, burnt at the edges, but the gesture warmed me. "I'm sorry," she said again, her voice cracking. "I was wrong about so much." I hugged her, the scent of vanilla clinging to her hair. We all make mistakes. The key is learning from them. David shared his own growth therapy sessions he'd started, unpacking the pressure he'd felt to provide after Tom's death. "I thought protecting you meant controlling things," he admitted over coffee, steam curling from his mug. "But I was wrong." These conversations weren't easy. Tears flowed, silences stretched, but they built bridges. Plank by plank, as seasons turned autumn leaves giving way to winter's frost, I found a new purpose. Arthur and I established a small foundation, anonymously funding scholarships for young entrepreneurs, inspired by his journey. I volunteered at the library, reading to children, their giggles a balm for old wounds. Life wasn't perfect. Doubts crept in on sleepless nights, the clock ticking reminders of betrayal. But I chose peace, focusing on what remained. One crisp spring day, a year after the wedding, we hosted a family gathering, not grand, just burgers on the grill, smoke wafting lazily, laughter mingling with birdsong. David grilled the meat, flipping patties with tongs, while Lena set the table, her movements lighter, less guarded. Arthur and I watched from the swing, his arm around my shoulders. "Look at us," I said softly, "almost whole again." He nodded, eyes crinkling. "Almost, and that's enough." The afternoon unfolded warmly. Stories shared, apologies revisited in whispers. David raised a toast with lemonade, voice steady, "To new beginnings, and to you, Mom, for showing us what real strength looks like." I blinked back tears, the glass cool in my hand. It wasn't erasure of the pain, but acceptance, a scar that reminded without defining. In the months that followed, boundaries solidified. Visits were planned, conversations honest. Lena and I even started a book club, just us, discussing novels over tea, the pages turning like chapters in our relationship. David thrived at work. Promotions earned without shortcuts, his confidence rooted deeper. Arthur's health held strong. We traveled modestly, a train ride through countryside, fields blurring past windows. We danced in our living room to old records, his hands on my waist, the needle scratching softly. Through it all, the moral wove itself clear. Family isn't blood alone. It's choice, respect, growth. Mockery stems from fear, but truth heals if we let it. I learned to value myself beyond roles, mother, widow, wife, to demand dignity, even from those closest. Now, as I sit here reflecting, the porch swing creaking under me, Arthur beside me with a book in hand, I feel a quiet power. The wedding's shadow has faded, replaced by light. Betrayal taught me resilience, forgiveness, grace. And so, dear ones, as the years weave on, I've come to see that life's tapestry is made of both bright threads and shadowed ones. Arthur and I grow old together in the best way, sharing sunrises over coffee, the steam mingling with morning dew, and evenings where his hand in mine feels like home. David and Lena have changed, truly. They've become more present, their apologies turning into actions. Like the way David now calls just to hear my voice, or Lena shares recipes she's tried, her laughter softer over the phone. We've built a fragile but real peace, one rooted in understanding that family isn't perfect, but it's worth the mending. Looking back, that wedding day wasn't just a union of two hearts, it was a revelation. A moment where hidden truths surfaced like bubbles in a pot about to boil. It taught me that mockery often hides insecurity, and that standing in your dignity can shift the world around you. I found strength I didn't know I had, not in anger, but in quiet truth-telling. And in the end, love real unadorned, love prevails over all the noise. What about you? If your own family mocked your happiness, would you have confronted them in the moment, or let time soften the edges? Share your thoughts with me. I'd love to hear how you'd navigate such a storm. If this story touched you, consider subscribing for more tales of the heart. Together, we learn and grow. Take care, my dear.